Well, my name is Kim Caffria, and I met Carolyn through you, Brian. I was in a Facebook group, and at the time, I was working for Snopes. I was a fact checker for 10 years, and I just stopped doing that in September. But I was a fact checker and a debunker, and in my line of work, not only is it like considered, like heresy to even consider mediumship being real, but it's like considered it's like I'm trying to so with mediumship it's kind of considered like mediums prey on grieving people, so it's very hostile to the concept of it. And then I was my husband died in December of 2017, and I did not think about changing my mind or anything like that. I mean, I was I was looking into like consciousness and stuff. So the way that I kind of ended up here was I was reading near death experiences, but from the perspective of I wanted to see what it was like when somebody died, like from people who had gotten close enough to that point and come back. I did not expect, because there's this idea in the kind of skeptic realm that that all near death experiences are caused by the unproven release of DMT when a person dies. So there's no speculative, there's not really, I think, any data to support that. But if you go into certain communities where this is kind of like a core belief, people will always say that as if it's like a statement of fact, like, oh, NDs are caused by DMT, and it's just kind of like a dream, in the same way that we dream and then you just die and whatever. And they always say, nobody has come back from death, which is like a strange thing because we have no threshold, like as a for sure. Like we used to have, like, I think when your heart stopped, you were considered dead, and maybe they revived people, but we've been reviving people like more and more dramatically, I think, since medicine has been progressing. So we don't really have a clear, like, I don't like when people say that, just because we don't have a clear benchmark for when somebody is officially dead, and people have been like officially dead and been resuscitated. So I don't know, it's just a strange thing. So I was reading them, and what I was anticipating was what I had always heard from other skeptics, which is near-death experiences are inconsistent. They only happen to religious people. Atheists never have them. Like, and all of that sounded so plausible to me that I never questioned it. Like, there's so many aspects of this that I just never questioned because they just seemed so plausible. So I just believed that, and my husband believed that. We both believed that, and we believed both of those things so strongly that we never even discussed, like, even as like, if there was an after, like, we never ever had that conversation because it was such a ridiculous premise to us that it would be like, what if we had a pet unicorn? Like, we didn't think of it that way. So we never had any sort of concept of this, and I think that actually helped me in having this experience. So then I was reading stuff in the literature, and it was not what I had heard it was, and that was confusing. So then I kind of moved over to stuff that was related to consciousness and how consciousness works, and that also was inconsistent. And then it kind of led me to the cardiac stuff where some resuscitation stuff occurred. So I was just getting all these mixed answers. And then I spoke to you, and I think I might have said something. I think I said, I don't want to be offensive, but I don't believe in that stuff. I just, whatever. And then you weren't offended, so that was cool. And then you mentioned Carolyn, and I was like, well, I guess that would kind of, like, because at that point I was just so confused about why this was inconsistent, because I had heard for so long that it was basically settled science. And then I made an appointment with Carolyn, and I think my first appointment with her was on February 22nd, 2018. And I remember that because that's my college boyfriend's birthday. He's also over there. He actually has talked to Carolyn once, but he doesn't come to my readings. So it would just happen to fall on that day. And I did this reading with Carolyn. And so she started out in the reading, and she was talking about my job. And I was saying, like, I was speaking to her recently, and I was saying that a lot of the validations I got were ones that I couldn't share because they had to do with my work and my workplace and stuff that was going on there that was like legally fraught. And she gave me information that I didn't have, and I was correcting her. And this happens a lot. So she was like, this is the case. And I was like, oh no, that was the case, but that's no longer the case. And she's like, no, it still is. And I was like, okay, like, whatever. And then I found out a few weeks later, she was right. And that actually happened. I spoke to her recently, and there was something like that. I'm trying to remember what it was, but so for the first hour of my reading, she was talking about the work that I did. She actually connected with one of the subjects of a page that I had written and into my reading, I guess. And this was really funny because it was such a big story that year, and it was like one of the most memorable stories of 2016. And this is like the beginning of 2018. And Carolyn is talking about this guy, and she's saying he's wearing an American flag shirt, which he was wearing in all the pictures. And I couldn't place him for like 15 minutes. And then she said something, and I said, "Wait, is it this person?" And then she was like, "Yes, yes, that's who's." And he just wanted to say thank you. And that was like 15 minutes of my reading. It was like just unexpected. And then she was talking about my my family, and she was really accurate, but like she never mentioned my husband, and I was confused. It was just such a strange experience. And then like halfway through it, he started to like she started to pick him up, and I guess he was there the whole time waiting. But she immediately gave me a piece of evidence that this is another thing. It's like I have this piece of evidence, and when people give it to me, it's something that's so not public knowledge that like it's like a key for me. Like the first thing she said was something that only me and him knew, and nobody else knew. And when I was telling a friend about the reading like a week later, she was like, "Oh, I didn't know that happened." So it was like that much of a secret. And then she started, talking for him, and it was so detailed. So she's all like, she brought me, and it was really funny because one of the first things she said was, he keeps making me feel like he answered the question, and then I realized he didn't. And that's something he did. It was really annoying. Like you could ask him a question and he would never give you a straight answer. Like, no, I don't know. It was just this thing he had. Like he would go through customs and he would do it to the customs people. And he was always the last person out because he was doing that. So like I would ask him like, anything, and he just wouldn't give me a straight answer. So she did kind of get it out of him, but it took a long time. But not because like she couldn't read him. It was because he was being intransigent. But yeah, she gave me a lot of information. And one of the things that I was, when I spoke with her recently, we were just talking about the fear of people being like, of mediums hot reading people. And, I'm very familiar with that. And I took precautions, not because, because the way I approached it with Carolyn was also like, I wanted to be respectful. Like I wasn't, like challenging her. I was just trying to resolve something for myself, but also because I didn't believe in any of it, I guess I was kind of inherently challenging it. So I went into it like, I wasn't like, you have to prove stuff to me. It was just kind of like, nothing is going to come of this. So it was very surprising to me. But she gave me all these details. But one of the other things that I noticed immediately was like, he goes by so many names. And like, not like he goes by so many names, but there's the name his family calls him, which he doesn't like me to call him that. There's the name that I call him, and there's the name that all of our friends call him. And she got all of them. And that was really interesting and she said, you don't call him that, you call him this. She got like all of that, like, and this is like in the first 30 seconds. So, well, it was like a minute and a half. And then she, went through, just all these different details. Like one of the things that she kept saying, was that she was talking about a bottle of essential oil. And, I thought that she was talking about an essential oil that was on his bedside table, so I was pretty sure that's what it was. And she was like, "No, it's not that." Then this again went on for like 10 minutes, and I was like, "Are you sure?" No. And then I was like, "Oh wait, I think that's my wedding perfume." And she was like, "Yes," like because she was saying that it was making me sad to use it, and I just didn't put out all of that. This was my first reading, so it was kind of, I wasn't like used to doing validations. And it went on for a long time, and I'm just trying, because that one, I know I have like notes somewhere, but also I don't know if I took notes the first time because I always take notes now when I have readings with her, but in the beginning I didn't think it's the volume of information is so extensive with her that it's very hard to take notes, and it's very hard to record if you try. So it's like you're trying to take notes and you can't write down as fast as like the evidence she's giving you. So, she like, it didn't take very long. Like even during the reading, I was like, this is obviously not any of the things that I expected it to be. It's not something she looked up because none of this information is online. And then recently, like I talked to her and we were just like testing it to see. So she was going to try to see if like we could find a record that linked us. Okay, so this is another thing that is kind of just background. Because of my job, I used to get like it wasn't just death threats, but I would get like harassment a lot. And sometimes it was in the media, and not super a lot, but when it was in the media, it would get super intense. And it was like sites like Breitbart. So they would just direct harassment our way. So I was really cautious, not to let anybody know. I didn't want anybody to know who I was married to or who he was or what his name was. And he has an extremely common name. So I made sure there were no links between us online. When he died, a lot of our mutual friends didn't know that we were married. Like that's how good we were at keeping it a secret. So um, it was just kind of a thing. It was really hard to find this information, but a lot of the information that, like I was saying, the information she gave me was just stuff you can't look up anywhere. Like the layouts of our houses. She can always tell me exactly what I'm wearing and the things that I put on before, because like I usually dress up for a reading like it's a date. So I'll like try different stuff on and I don't like it or I like this and she'll know exactly what it is and she could describe it to me. Like she'll like one time I did my makeup and then I didn't like the lipstick, so I used a lip stain instead that smelled like strawberries and she got like all of that like just in the first few minutes. So she always gets that stuff. See, that was my first reading. And then at the end of the reading, when I hung up the phone, it was almost like I made this choice instantaneously. And the last time I spoke with her, we were talking about her readings can be so detailed and accurate that they frighten. I've witnessed this, and you've probably witnessed this too because you've recommended it to people. Have you ever had anybody get scared by a reading?
Mhm. Yes, yes.
And then they come back to you and like you're like almost like customer service for Carolyn. Like, so I had that happen with me and Samantha recommended her to somebody in the group that we're in, and then the person freaked out, and then was kind of contacting Carolyn, but also like asking us like, what did you tell her? And it's like, I don't know you. I don't even know. I don't remember her name. Like, there's nothing that I could tell her about you. The only thing I remember is that she had a reading with Carolyn, but she was so scared she never actually came back to the group. Like, it was that unsettling for her, and I can see that. It kind of goes into the concept of ontological shock, which we're hearing a lot now because of the UAP disclosure stuff. And when people get information that dissolves their worldview in like a split second, you experience something sometimes called ontological shock. And I think I was already in shock because the first year you're always in shock. So I don't know if the ontological shock hit me as hard as it would have under other circumstances. But I did experience that. Like, this was unwanted knowledge for me because, like I was saying to Carolyn, like I just thought when you died that was it. Like there was nothing after that. So anything that happened after my death was like non-existent in my mind. Like there was no
Mhm.
history or anything before, history existed before I was born, but when I won't know anything about it. So even that was like a frightening realization because you start thinking about, like, one of the first things that I realized too, and I think I've said this to you before, is I think that people almost intentionally avoid this because it's not hard. It took me not even I think I was in the group for like 3 days and then I talked to you and I found Carolyn. I didn't have to like go on a quest or like go super far. So I think that there's this kind of load bearing neurosis going on where people don't want to know for sure because, like, as soon as I knew for sure, which I didn't expect to happen, I started thinking about all the people who weren't here anymore and things that might have upset them after they died. And it's like, we don't want to think about that. Like, if somebody dies and leaves you stuff or leaves other people stuff and you don't distribute it right, like, you don't want to think about that. So I think that that's one of the reasons why people kind of get freaked out. But I think also with Carolyn specifically, she's so, like, I remember when I had my first reading, I was talking to my editor, Brooke, at the time, and one of our coworkers, and our coworker was like, I don't want this person to know that I exist. So it's like she wasn't even directly involved, but I've gotten that sentiment from people before. It's the implications are really scary. And actually, there was another editor who I worked with briefly, and I think this was my first reading. Carolyn said, there's going to be a shakeup and people are going to leave. And I was like, nobody has ever left. Like, anybody who's been here has been here and never left. Like, we haven't had anybody quit or leave. Like, there was one person who was like a part-time worker. But other than that, everybody stayed there. So it was like unconscionable to even think that. Like, it just seemed so off the mark. And then I mentioned it to this other editor who I wasn't super close with, and she got really freaked out. And I was like, what? And she's like, nobody knows this, but I accepted the fellowship, so I have to leave. And it was that happened so much with her. And then also, this is like completely to the side of the point, but me and my cousin. So my cousin has been really interested in this stuff lately, and she hasn't had any experiences like the ones you have with Carolyn, and she would like to. So we went to one of the Matt Fraser group readings online, and it was fine. It wasn't. I mean, I wouldn't go again. It's totally fine, but I think it's like a claw machine. I think he reads like 4 people out of 1,000, but you can't see how many people it is. So that's fine. It's not a big deal. But I had my notes out. I keep my notes in this like one book, and I was flipping through them, and I realized when I was looking through my notes, I had a reading. I'm pretty sure it was on December 21st, 2021. Sorry, yeah, I think it was the 21st because, well, it was December 21 for sure. And she said something to me about blood pressure, blood clots, and then she said, it's not your fault. And this we kind of only recently figured out the last part. So I forgot about that. I didn't know until this month when I was flipping through my notes. She mentioned that in December 2021, something about a blood clot. And in November 2022, suddenly out of nowhere, a blood clot went into my heart and I had a heart attack. So there are all these things that like the validations come years later, which is kind of interesting. You've probably experienced that. The first thing she said to me in a reading, and I don't know if this is like something she would necessarily want to disclose. Like maybe you can ask her first, but it's not anything super personal. So the first person she brought in was my grandmother, who's Italian. And my mom's brother married my dad's sister, and my dad's side is Italian and my mom's side is Irish. And my grandmother had this really weird rule where it was like both of her kids were fully Italian and the Irish part didn't count. So she would always tell us that we were Italian and like, Irish people don't have any culture and you have to learn this and you have to learn. This is a really big deal. She wanted us to know that we were Italian. It was part of our identity. And it was just, she constantly said it, like she was always reminding. So that's what I thought when she said that. I was like, oh, that's my grandmother. Yeah, she always said that. And then 4 years later, Carolyn called me like really late at night, and her sister had gotten DNA test results, and she found out that some like mixed European heritage that she thought wasn't any, like I don't think she never thought she was Italian. It was Italian heritage. So I think my grandmother was saying like in a few years you're going to find out that you're Italian, and I thought that was really cool. And there was something else like that with her that was I'm trying to remember now, but it was I only found out about the heart attack thing like last week. Like obviously I knew I had a heart attack, but I didn't realize that she predicted it, and she did. And then when I spoke with her most recently, I said, I was looking through my notes on that day, like a few days ago or a few weeks ago, and I noticed that, and I didn't realize that you predicted that. And then afterwards, I mean, this is kind of personal, but I mean, you can use your discretion. The part where it says it's not your fault, that was in all capital letters, like she was emphasizing it. And when I had the heart attack, they didn't think it was a heart attack. They didn't know what it was. It took a few hours to figure out what happened. And I didn't anticipate this to happen, but they told me around 5 a.m, and they were like, we confirmed it. It was a heart attack. And then I like started hysterically crying, which is very rare for me. And I cried on and off the whole time I was in the hospital. And the reason why was like, because it was like, I missed an exit point. And even though it's not like I'm dying to like leave here, like I'm like, it was still there. Like it was still, I was so close to seeing him and then I didn't. And I didn't experience or anything. And then I was like telling Carolyn, I saw that when I found this note a few weeks ago and I didn't know what it meant. And then she said, oh my God, what he meant was, it's not your fault that you didn't die. It wasn't supposed to happen. And that was like really weird because I never would have gotten that from that. I didn't know what it meant. And she knew what it meant, like when I said it to her. Yeah, this is kind of like one of those things you might not have heard, but it's really interesting. And I have proof of it. Like it might take a little while to find. But so I had a reading with Carolyn in February of 2018. And then I went back in June with my editor and we had a joint reading in June of 2018. So I texted or called Carolyn to arrange those, but we'd never spoken outside of readings, like ever. And then in August of 2018, she texted me and she was like, is everything okay by you? Like, your husband is here and he won't go away or something like that. Like, and I was like, yeah, no, nothing, everything's fine. It's totally fine. And she was like, okay, I just wanted to check in. Yeah, I don't ever do this, but, I just felt like because he's here and he won't go away that, whatever. So I thanked her. And like 24 to 48 hours later, I can't remember exactly, but I can find out. Lightning struck the electric box outside of my house and there was a fire. And we had to leave the house for like a month. It was a huge deal. there were a few other anomalies that happened during the fire, but it was really weird because Carolyn texted me that, like, for the first time ever, she texted me in a kind of social way just to ask me that, and then the fire happened, and it was like, I have the dates of the fire, like, on, because when it happened, I mentioned it on Facebook, so I have the dates there. And in my texts with her, I have the text where she's like, "Is everything okay?" And it was like right after the fire. I mean, right before the fires.
As I recall, I don't remember the exact details. I think you came to me, you said, I'm a skeptic, but I want to check this out. And I want to put this to rest. I want to find out whether this is real or not. And who's the best medium you know?
Well, the way that I remember it, and like we probably could find that conversation, but I think I said I don't believe in this stuff, but I've been running into conflicting information, and I think you said, you know, it was like, I'm paraphrasing, but I think you said if you have any doubt, you should talk to Carolyn, and that will like clear all your. And I was like, okay, fine. Like it was kind of like, what else am I going to do? Sure, yeah, I'll do that. So it was like, I don't think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't thinking about mediums. I did see a medium around here, but it didn't. It just made more questions. Like he was good, but he wasn't. Carol, it was different. It's just like hard for me to discuss because he died like 6 months after I had the reading. So I don't want him to think that he's a good medium, but he's not Carolyn. So it's like it wasn't a bad reading, but it wasn't a Carolyn reading. So I may have mentioned that, but I don't think I did. It was like, I don't know. It was strange, but I think that I said that I was just confused and I didn't believe in this stuff and I didn't know how to like something to that effect. I didn't know how to resolve these questions. And I think that you said you should go see Carolyn or you should talk to Carolyn, but it wasn't like you were saying like, oh, you should get a medium reading. Like you were saying this particular person will answer that question if you have it. Like
Yeah, and I remember us having conversations about like because you again being the evidence-based person you were, I would say, well, there's Julie Beischel, there's Gary Schwartz, there's Penny Sartori, and you're like, I remember you came back and you said, how do I not know any of this exists?
yeah, it was because it's once you have that kind of like and the other thing I was just thinking is I don't think anybody but Carolyn could have done this. Like I think it had a perfectly aligned thing. It had to be her. It had to be in this particular period of time. It had to be like I don't think I would have gone if like a person that I knew well at the time told me. Like it was like all these things. Like you were such a new acquaintance to me online at the point like that point where okay, so it wasn't embarrassing for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Knew me. Like I hid this for a long time, and then when I started talking about it, I got a lot of backlash. Like I think I was hiding in a group where I knew none of my friends would be, where nobody could catch having these conversations, and then
right.
you person because you believed in this stuff. I think I felt bad for you for being deluded. Like that's like those.
Yes. Yeah, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I was talking to someone about you the other day, and I think it was kind of like you're thinking, well, he seems like a smart guy. Why does he believe this?
It was like that, and it was confusing to me because you were obviously really intelligent. And in my mind, those two things could not coexist. Like you could either be intelligent and a materialist, or superstitious and anything else, and there is nothing in between. And I
Right.
think a lot of this because then when I talked to my editor, she was open to this stuff, but she never would have told me because I was a materialist. We were talking about people getting scared. And I can't remember the context of like when I was talking about that with her, but when people get scared, I've noticed it goes on for days. Like I've had people kind of get rattled if I've recommended her, and then they'll have questions over the course of days, like, well, what about this, and what about that, what about this, and what about that, because it's like their brain is like slowly processing what
Mhm.
they but for me that happened in like 10 seconds. Like it was like, did she know, did she know, did she know, did she, I went through like the checklist in my head, and within 10 seconds I was like, none of that happened. She was obviously doing what she said she's doing. I'm gonna have to talk about this. Like now I view it differently, but then I was like, I'm gonna have to talk about this. This can't be an accident, and it's gonna have implications. So it wasn't like on balance. Obviously, I'm really happy, but it's like one of those long term, short term things. In the long term, it is nice to know, but in the short term, it really like effed up my life and the way that I felt about things and everything I knew. One of the things that I went into the reading confused about was how I would be able to like, I'm so easy to Google. And at the time, there was so much information about me. Like, Google has changed and a lot of the stuff that's been like, there's a lot of stuff missing from the internet now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but back then it was not like that. So somebody could Google me and there's nobody else with my name and they could find exactly who I am and, you know, all this information. But none of the information in my first reading was stuff that you could find by Googling, like none of it. Like there was nothing that she brought up that would be like, and there are big things that you, if you Googled me, that you'd come up with, like that you'd think that she would say in some sideways way, but like none of the stuff she said was Googleable, like not one thing. Because there were like high profile things that happened that were just like big deals to me. And, you know, I would assume that a medium would mention them and she didn't. So it was like not even like some of it, it was like all of it was just so highly personal that there are still things I can't talk about publicly. And it's always, it's specific and like every so often, like a lot of it is establishing, but it's always or almost always a memory that nobody else was present for. Like, because, you know, with my readings specifically, I'm almost always interacting with my husband through Carolyn. So there was a lot happening between us that nobody was there for. And when she's establishing something, so like sometimes it's just evidential, but it's like specific and nobody was there for it. But a lot of it is like, I have to tell you this. This is important. You need to know this. And it is really important information. Like the stuff about the heart attack, I didn't know at the time. Like obviously heart attacks are unpredictable, but and the fire. So it's like sometimes, you know, she'll be kind of urgent with stuff, and when she is, usually it turns out to be something. But it's like downloading a zip file with Carolyn. So she's talking to you and she's like, okay, hold on a second. And then it's like 15 seconds pass. And then she'll talk for 15 or 20 minutes straight and she got all of that information in 15 seconds and it takes that long to like give it all to you, and it's really interesting. But it's like I always like think of a zip file when I think of the way that she's like, okay, hold on, and it takes about as long as it takes a zip file to download, and then it's got like 40 files in it and they're all like really detailed. Nobody is as fast as Carolyn with downloading, and she's like high speed internet, and like other people are kind, like I'm not trashing other mediums, it's just it's like she's like, you know, there's like channeling, like she's just like so like open as a channel that it's like a machine gun of evidence. It's like firing at you, like she's so fast, and it's so much like the volume. Like I've been to good mediums who have given me good information, but it's like so much slower in a pace. Like I don't think anybody is as fast as she is or as like thorough as she is, which is also frustrating because she's the first medium that I went to, so she kind of set this baseline for me.
Yeah.
I can only really go to her. Like I have had good experiences with other mediums, but it's like not even close to the same.